Good Sunday morning, everybody. The Senate gears up for a likely vote on health care this week. Will a cornerstone of the president's agenda fall into place? Plus, lawmakers want to hear now from Loretta Lynch. Did the former attorney general interfere in the Clinton email probe? Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Maria Bartiromo. Welcome to Sunday Morning Futures. This could be the week. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell looking for a vote on the GOP's health care bill. Does he have enough support? Republican Senator Jerry Moran will join us shortly. Also, senators are looking for answers in the Clinton email investigation from Loretta Lynch. Did she interfere? I'll talk with former Attorney General Alberto Gonzales coming up. Then Eric Trump responding to the ugliness that has been aimed at his father. From Kathy Griffin to Johnny Depp, what isn't there? Why isn't there more outrage over these attacks? We're looking ahead right now on Sunday Morning Futures. And the Senate Judiciary Committee opening a new investigation. Lawmakers are looking into former Attorney General Loretta Lynch and whether she tried to interfere with the investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server as Secretary of State. Judge Alberto Gonzales was Attorney General during the George W. Bush administration. He is also the Dean of Belmont University College of Law, and he's the author of the book, True Faith and Allegiance, a story of service and sacrifice in war and peace. Judge, good to have you on the program this morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
So what do you make of this? Obviously, the Judiciary Committee probing this reported Loretta Lynch assurances to stifle the Clinton email investigation. We know that Bill Clinton, her husband, met with Loretta Lynch on the tarmac 2 days before Hillary Clinton was to be interviewed by the FBI. We know that Loretta Lynch asked Jim Comey to call it a matter instead of an investigation. And we're looking at the existence of a memo where apparently she tells a Democratic operative, we won't let this go too far. Do you think Loretta Lynch interfered in an investigation?
Well, I think it's really too early to tell, Maria, quite frankly. I think that there are legitimate questions raised by some of these allegations, and I think it's perfectly appropriate for the Congress Judiciary Committee to examine exactly what happened here. Obviously, Jim Comey has testified that with respect to her telling him to call it a matter instead of an investigation, that in and of itself would not be an obstruction in my judgment because the investigation continues forward no matter what you want to call it. Nonetheless, what are the reasons for that kind of direction? And it obviously contributed to Jim Comey's concerns about Loretta Lynch's commitment to this investigation. And perhaps one of the reasons why, when in fact he came out in July of last year and to talk about the Clinton email investigation, why he did so on his own without participation of the Attorney General.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's a lot of questions to be asking, and yet it feels like the critics of the president are only asking about this potential collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. And of course, we know it doesn't exist because there's no evidence of such collusion. And yet we actually have evidence of Jim Comey following the order of his boss. He did call it a matter.
Well, of course, and it remains to be seen whether or not there actually was any collusion. This is the reason why Bob Mueller is doing an investigation. As far as I know, the Trump administration has not done an investigation as to whether or not there was collusion. And so I think it's premature to say there was no collusion, although I think you're absolutely correct. After months and months, there is certainly no evidence that's been presented that there is, in fact, collusion. And with respect to what happened during the Obama administration, again, I think it is appropriate for Congress to look into this. And if need be, I think you're going to have an investigation within the Department of Justice.
And there's also the senators in the Judiciary Committee are writing a letter. They sent a letter already to Loretta Lynch herself, to Gail Scoville from the Open Society Foundation, as well as the chief of the Division of Operations, State of California Department of Justice. They say that the FBI is reported to have obtained an email or a memo written by a Democratic operative who expressed confidence that Ms. Lynch would keep the Clinton investigation from going too far. She said, we will keep this from going too far. Now, if that memo exists, what do you think about that?
Well, again, a big if that memo exists. And there are all kinds of allegations floating around here. But obviously, if such a memo did exist, that would be very, very troubling in terms of hearing an example of the Attorney General possibly putting her thumb on the scale to prevent an ongoing investigation. And that would be a very serious matter. But I would caution again, a lot of allegations get made in Washington. A lot of allegations get made with respect to one political party in power as opposed to the other. And so it remains to be seen what in fact are the facts, here, and before we rush to judgment.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. I mean, you were Attorney General under President Bush. You also fired certain U.S. attorneys, but right off the bat, I mean, it wasn't the president wanted that done. That was done. So I want to ask you to go back and look at what President Trump has done. Should he have fired people who were not in step with his agenda from the get-go, like Jim Comey? Should Jim Comey have gone in the early days of the Trump administration? Well,
that is clearly the prerogative of the President of the United States. As the Chief Executive Officer, he makes that call. And you could make the argument that if you're going to make a change with the FBI Director, you do it at the outset, if in fact it's based upon actions he took while President Obama was in office. On the other hand, I can make the argument that in choosing a new FBI Director, you want the input of the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General. We did not have those individuals in place at the time, and so that might be an argument or a reason why President Trump wanted to wait until he had those people in place in order to get their input as to who the new FBI Director would be going forward.
I guess what I'm asking you, Judge, is how hard is it to depoliticize these agencies? It feels like it's so political, and the American people just want justice. You know, I mean, from all of the leaking to, the attacks on the president and his agenda, to the obstructionism coming on the left where they don't want him to execute this agenda. Do you think the agencies, government agencies like the FBI, CIA, Department of Justice, have they become too politicized? And how do you turn that around?
I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't, because you've got so many career individuals who do their work above politics. Now, and one thing we have to remember always is that even though the Department of Justice should be non-political in terms of investigations, nonetheless, people like the Attorney General, people appointed by the President, they report to the President. Their job is to promote the President's law enforcement policies and priorities. And so the Attorney General, unlike other officials, other cabinet members, wears two hats, and many Americans lose sight of the fact that, yes, you're a member of the President's team, but you're also the chief law enforcement officer of the country, and it's in that second area where you should be totally non-political.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Let me ask you about the cost of all of this, because, the American people voted for an agenda of economic growth. They want to see tax reform. They want to see health care reform. Obviously, that's what they voted on. And yet, in Washington, the Russia probe seems to take all the oxygen out of the room. What's the cost of something like this, with all of these hearings over and over, trying to look for potential collusion, which hasn't been found yet? What kind of a cost is that to the taxpayers? And does it threaten an actual agenda from getting executed, because they're all talking about Russia and not about health care reform and tax reform?
Well, first of all, let me emphasize, if in fact Russia meddled in our election, that is extremely serious. We need to know, and we need to respond appropriately. Having said that, I know how an investigation can demoralize and distract an agency. And it really is tough because you try to do good things, you try to talk about the good things that you're doing, and the press doesn't want to hear about it. They don't want to cover that. They want to talk about the investigation. So it requires a team that's very, very focused, led by the leadership, to make sure the team is focused on doing what is appropriate, what is right, what is needed for the American people.
Does the cost of these hearings go in the tens of millions of dollars, Judge? Is it $100 million? Someone, I mean, how do we know what the cost is?
I can't quantify the cost, but okay. I do know that if I have to go testify before the Congress, I'll spend days getting ready for that testimony, right, when in fact I should be out fighting terrorists, fighting child molesters, so the costs are tremendous.
That's my point. Exactly right. Judge, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
We so appreciate it. Judge Alberto Gonzalez there. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, meanwhile, wants a vote on the health care bill this week. But 5 Republican senators have already said they oppose it. Why will McConnell have the votes to get this passed? Republican Senator Jerry Moran will join us live from the Senate to give us an update on where that bill stands. Follow me on Twitter at Maria Bartiromo, at Sunday Futures. Let us know what you'd like to hear from Senator Moran and Eric Trump coming up in the program. Stay with us. We're looking ahead right now on Sunday Morning Futures.